It's a great day on the pod, my friends. We have German Abarca today joining us from his home in Tucson. German is a veteran of the reality wars, from his start with the real world to camera and DP work on many hit shows to directing for the last 15 years. We dive into our past together, first talking about MTV's Senseless Acts of Video, a precursor to the popular reality stunt genre, to I'd Do Anything, a rollicking competition show created by the mercurial genius Scott Messick that literally broke German. We get emotional and somber as we consider how the industry has changed, and as German talks about his new career as a cybersecurity professional, it's sad to think that at this point in our lives there even has to be a plan B. It's truthful and real talk. This is B. Smith Second Sticks, and we have speed. German Abarca, welcome to the pod, sir.
Thank you. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you. We were talking off camera a little bit, and I don't think either of us knows the last time we actually saw each other in person.
No, it's been ages. A lot of text in between.
Yeah, there's some
Actually,
text.
in person.
I keep all my texts.
Wow.
I think I was texting you back in like 2019 or something
Oh
like that,
man,
2021.
that's
But
crazy.
I think the last time we actually like worked together was Kitchen Nightmares. We were working together, and that
Yeah, I think
was
in New Jersey. New Jersey, I
yep.
think.
That's what I remember. I remember because I bought a hat and I bought a lacrosse ball to use on my back, which I learned from you as like this is great for
It
working out
works.
the
It
pain that
works.
you're
Yeah.
you're experiencing. I remember how painful that show was. That was a
Oh, it
it's a
was a rough
painful
one.
show. It was as far as shows go, but that's kind of the reality,
Yeah,
you know, deal. I guess
exactly. It was fun.
you get.
It was
Yeah,
fun.
it is fun. I mean, there's some pain and there's some after effects. I feel them every day now, but at the same time, we made a lot of great television and
Yep.
we made a lot of great friends and people you could go to war with, people you could, have lifelong relationships with.
100%.
So, well, I know that you are in the midst of a number of things. We talked a little bit
Hmm.
before. I know you told me that you and your wife are going to start a podcast. Is that public? Is that for public consumption or?
Almost not yet. We're still in
Okay.
the. We started recording,
Okay.
for sure, but it probably I probably won't publish one, and I'm guessing maybe by the beginning of next month.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm going to come back to that at the end because I
Okay.
usually like to kind of tie it all up in like a nice little bow, what
Hmm.
people are up to now, that kind of thing. So, but I know
Nice.
you live in Tucson. I learned that off your LinkedIn. So
Yep. Yeah, I moved
shout out
here
LinkedIn.
almost 2 years
LinkedIn.
ago.
Wow. That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. Like I have not had physical, face to face with you in so long. I
I'm
mean,
pretty quiet about my stuff too, though. Like I don't really advertise that
I
much.
like
I
that.
don't know for better or worse what I'm doing.
I like that. This podcast has definitely exposed me way more than I would normally prefer, but it is what it is. And we will talk about this a little later, but I do want to highlight that you are looking into kind of a plan B, a second career in cybersecurity, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, I just got to the point. I'm guessing you and a lot of people understand that I personally needed something because it doesn't seem like I can rely on production anymore.
Sadly, that is
Sadly.
seems to be the truth for a lot of people. I mean, there's probably a few who are still kind of making a
Mhm.
go at it enough, working enough where they can actually, make a living. And by living, I mean pay their bills, their mortgage,
Yeah.
their rent.
Yeah.
Putting gas in your car these days is kind of tenuous due to the fact that gas is pretty pricey right now. But um, so cybersecurity. So what made you choose that field?
Um. Well, I've been battling it for God. a few years now, whether what to do or whether to do anything, or and if I found something else to do, what would it be? It's I had a friend of mine. I'm going to go off a little tangent here. A quick story. Also works in production. He used to be in reality, but now scripted more than anything. But during COVID, we like started running into each other at the grocery store a bunch of times, and we'd just laugh and say, like, we're both house husbands now. Uh, but then a few years later, we were still kind of running into each other at Whole Foods more often than not, going, "Oh, you're still, looking. I'm still looking." Anyway, the last time actually was right before I moved out here to Tucson. I was coming down the escalator and I saw him, and we're like, "Hey, what's going on?" And we were talking about it again, and I was telling him that I'm thinking of, trying to figure out something else to do. And he said something that still sticks with me to this day. And he said, he's like, "I don't have any other skills. This is what I do. This is what I, trained to do." And I could only agree with him. This is what I've done for 20 something years. How am I going to learn something else now? I wouldn't consider myself ancient, but I'm not exactly young either. So it stuck with me. But in talks with my wife and other friends, I'm kind of really going a long way to get to the
Don't
point
worry
of the
about it.
story.
I got bandwidth for you, man. We got a lot of bandwidth. Let's go.
um, when I finally sort of decided, and part of it also, it's not fair to my wife. I don't want her to be the only person bringing in money, and plus, besides the money, I just miss the work. I love what I do. Um, but anyway, I called another friend of mine who had already decided to move on. He used to be a camera operator too, and I asked him how he made his decision and stuck with it. And he said, "You know what? We're so, you know." He was speaking about himself. He's like, but in general, he said we're so used to waiting for the phone to ring, that it's that we almost became trained or become trained over the years of, oh, the phone's going to ring, and it's going to be fine. I'm going to have a job. I'm going to have a show. It's going to be great. And then he said, finally, I had to just tell myself, you know what? The phone's not going to ring, and I can't keep waiting for it to ring anymore. Um, so, he said, I just had to try to get ahead of it and do something. And that's what kind of made me finally decide, okay, I really need to find something and do something. And coming back to cybersecurity, the reason I picked that is I didn't really want to have to go back to school for 2 years minimum. Um, I not that I was going for the quick fix, but I wanted to find a way that I could get into something a little faster. So I started researching boot camps. Well, first I researched, 2-year programs, and I started finding out about boot camps. And I finally fell on a boot camp that seemed, legit and had good reviews and everything. And I signed up last year in what was it? In August. We started class in August, and it was 5 days a week, 4 hours of class per day, and then another, like, I would probably spend another two or more studying and doing labs and everything. And I finished that in November. But that was just part one, and then you have to get to even have a chance to get any kind of job, you have to get a basic certification. So I had to study for that for another couple of months, and then lo and behold, I was like, I'll take it. I'll take the exam in December, and then I get a job for December, a show. I haven't done anything a year, and then I planned the show in December.
Oh
So I was
boy.
like, okay, well, let me go do this, and I'll try to study while I'm doing the show, and then I'll take it in January. And it was impossible, and I was, like, not I don't know how many shows, but I was doing 15-hour days and plus some days.
Mm.
Anyway, once we wrapped up at the end of December, January, I studied and took the exam in February and passed. And now I'm just basically in the job hunt. But it's, so it's weird. I'm not going to turn down a show if it calls, but I'm
Of
also looking
course.
for this. So at least I have sort of two avenues. Nothing's come to fruition yet, but I have two avenues. So I think give myself a little bit of an upper hand.
Well, if it's anything like our business, if you remember back when, it was fairly fruitful, it seems like you would always get a call for two jobs at the same time after not
Yep.
having work for a while. Then all of a sudden the phone would ring, then it would ring again, and then you would be forced to make a decision. And you're like, okay, which one is the best? This one pays more, but this might have better long term, ramifications. So,
Yeah.
but, but, going back to something you said when you were talking about making that decision for your plan B, I think, which is really poignant and needs to be pointed out, is what you were dealing with is what so many of us are dealing with now, which is that we're not ancient, we're breathing, we can
Yeah.
work, we're physical people, we take care of ourselves,
Yeah.
but none of us are spring chickens anymore, or the 20s are behind
Yeah.
us, way behind us, so the idea of having to start over in something is daunting. It's
It is
crazy,
really
right?
bad. Yeah, I dealt with that a lot. I was like, even when I was thinking of signing up for the boot camp, I was talking to, they sign you a counselor before you even sign up. And you kind of just have a conversation with him. And then you kind of go back and forth. If you have any questions, like a couple weeks before the boot camp starts. And one of the things I asked, I said, listen, I don't consider myself old, but I'm also not young.
Hmm.
And this would be basically starting over in a sense. And then, I have those worries. I'm like, is somebody going to see the resume and be like, oh, cool. And then they interview me and go, he's a little older than we'd want. So there's that to deal with. And when you put like experience, all my experience is television.
Yeah.
So you got to try to figure out a way to make it transfer over to, for me, cybersecurity. Yeah, it's a bunch of weird things to deal with, and I wasn't there was one guy older than me in class, but I definitely wasn't the youngest in my boot camp either in my cohort. Um, but yeah, you're right. It's really daunting, especially when I finally decided, because that went into the decision. Part of the reason I chose cybersecurity is that they said there's plenty of work and there's job growth, and I also wanted something that eventually I can do from anywhere remotely.
Yeah, that
um,
makes total sense. So let's go into the time machine a little bit and talk about careers. And let's talk about your first career, which is the one in television. You
yeah.
might have had one before that, for all I know, but that's the one that's relevant to this podcast. So,
Yep.
how do you? Let's go back and tell me a little bit about how you got into the business in the first place.
Hmm. Yeah. So I was in Miami at the time. I just graduated college, and I was interning at MTV Latin America. They used to have their base in South Beach. So I was interning at the studio there, and it was blast. Anyway, the I had heard. I'm going way back here.
Yeah.
I had heard that the Real World was coming to town to shoot a season in Miami and Miami Beach. I was like, oh, that'd be freaking cool. Um, so I just started asking around there, and somebody found me a phone number, and I called, and they're like, oh, well, we're looking for interns to come help if you want to come do it. So I was like, sure. So I ended up like going to work there and not well intern there and like helping paint the house and put ND on the windows. I mean, at that time, you would do everything, um, take out garbage, whatever. And then the last day of the internship, one of the EPs comes up and he says, we need one more PA. It doesn't pay much, but if you want to do it, I was like, yeah, hell yeah. So my first job was the PA on Real World Miami. And that led to, I was with being a Murray and Real World for years. Like next season, I did Real World Boston as an AC, Real World Seattle as an AC, um, Real World Hawaii as an AC slash operator. And eventually that led to me um, I did a couple of stints as production manager on Road Rules, which was not my definitely not my thing.
Not an office
Um,
guy.
yeah, but then I started shooting. I can't remember exactly. Oh, you know what? My first show was Big Brother season one, and that kind of just snowballed. And then I went on to be on. I was an operator for years on Bachelor, on The Apprentice. Um, God, what
What was
else?
it about shooting? What was it about camera work that appealed to you as opposed to the other stuff that you were doing at the time?
I'm going to be completely honest. We were shooting. I was PA slate a scenes for in Real World on Miami, and we were out shooting one night at one of the nightclubs. And I remember the camera operator for that team. It was Craig Borders. He was in the club shooting, and I just looked. I was like, "That looks so friggin' cool." I just thought it looked really cool. I wish like something better. Like I was like, a film nerd. I came from film school. I didn't. I just thought it would be really fun. And then once I got my hands on a camera, it was fun. But then you start learning everything that goes with it, and all the technicalities and the art that goes with it too. And so for me, I kind of learned more. Like unlike a lot of other people who did go to film school, I learned basically as far as shooting and DP and all that stuff. I've learned it. I learned it on the job.
Well, I know that you have been very successful in that capacity. I know that eventually you transitioned into directing. We'll talk about that in a bit,
Yeah.
but I want to mention a show. This is like a blast from the past, if there ever was. And I mention it because I think it's the first time you and I worked together. And it was a show for
Oh wait, you
MTV
dropped for a
called,
second. What show?
what's that?
Oh, you dropped
Oh,
out for a second.
oh, sorry. It was a show that I believe we worked together for the first time. It was an MTV show. It was called Senseless Acts of Video. Do you
Oh, I
remember
love
that?
that show. That was my second show I ever shot in LA when I moved to LA.
Yeah, I remember. It was kind of like
I love
I
that
I
show.
think it was before like Fear Factor and all of
Yep,
those other shows, right? It was
I think
almost
it
kind of
was.
groundbreaking.
It was. It was like, yeah, it was like, yeah, they would take movie scenes and try to recreate the stunts from the movie scene.
On
Who
a
else was on
budget
that?
of
Was Steve
like,
Hernowitz.
oh, well, okay, all
Yeah, he
right.
was one of the ops on that too.
Oh my God, those were the old days, weren't they? I'm really feeling really kind of ancient, but um, I just remember the energy of being on that set because
Hmm.
there was this feeling that it could all go terribly wrong somehow. And that's kind of why we were there, in case it all did go terribly wrong. We would document it and, I mean, make a TV
Thank
show
God it
out
never
of it.
did. Yeah.
But those were crazy times. And again, the kind of the wild west of reality television. I mean,
Hmm.
you had bigger shows like Big Brother and Real World, things like that were manifesting themselves as bigger shows. But then you had all of these other networks on cable television that had to have content, and it seemed
Hmm.
like it was just coming out of the woodwork. Do you remember those times at all? And were
Well,
you just pretty much going from one job to another?
I do remember them, I was basically going from one job to like I couldn't believe it myself. Like I just thought that this is how it was. Because I remember, like you said, you somebody call and you're like, oh, okay, when's it for? And then like an hour later, somebody else will call and for the same time, and then you're like, oh, crap, which one do I do? This one is great for my resume, but this one sounds more fun, and I don't know these people. Maybe I should meet them. And it was crazy. I would just go from show to show.
Yeah, I remember. Boy, it seems like a long time ago.
I have a little
I'm
studio
laughing
apartment on
because I'm
Hollywood.
trying to keep from crying. So this is what I do.
Yeah,
I
I,
just
I
lean,
hear you. I
lean
feel
into
the same.
laughing. So
Yeah.
um, another show that I remember that you and I did together, and I have some fond memories
Mhm.
anyway about it, but it was another example of like a show that was just kind of batshit crazy. Was I'd Do Anything for Mess Media.
Oh, for mess. Yeah.
Yeah. Now Scott Messick alone, I
Oh,
kind of want to get Scott on the pod because I would
you
really
should.
love to get his perspectives on things. But tell me what you remember about those days. I'd Do Anything and Messick in general.
Well, I loved Scott. I still I haven't talked to him in years, but I still do. I always remember him fondly because I had gotten him. I had gotten his number when I was finishing um, Big Brother. They said, I was trying to get on Survivor, so I said, "Oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
call Scott Messick." So I called him, and he was like straight up and honest with me. He's like, "I'm not with them anymore, but I'm doing a show on my own called Boot Camp." And he's like, and I'll need operators for that. And this is like he didn't really know me, you know.
Yeah.
I just told him what I was working on. He's like, I need ops for that, but would you be interested? I was like, yeah, sure. So I always remember was one of the early sort of mentors, or people who supported me in the beginning. And he, after that, I was every show he was doing, I was pretty much doing. But that show, I'd do anything. You're gonna laugh at the one thing I remember that show.
Okay.
Uh,
It might be the same thing that
yeah,
the same things that I remember, but go ahead.
um, it was a real low budge sort of Fear Factor thing based on around sports.
Mm-hmm.
But we were at a racetrack out in, oh God, where the hell was it? It was
Pomona. It was in
way
Pomona,
out
wasn't
there,
it?
middle of summer, so it was
Pomona. Right.
blazing hot. Yep, and they had to, I don't, I'm just putting the pieces together, but they run barefoot along the track, but they had a
Yes.
little piece of like rug to stop so they could rest their feet so they don't get burned, and they had to pull in a big ass tire. And they put me on the track with the first woman who was a power lifter, I think. And they said, "Don't worry, she's not going to run. It's too hot." And they go 3, 2, 1, go, and she goes, and she starts sprinting. And I'm trying to backtrack with the the camera along the track. And they had pulled my AC because he was getting in the way or she was getting in the way. And I tripped over some kind of post in the middle of the track and go flying, land on my back. The camera lands on my stomach, on my ribs. And then the funny thing is, the camera dropped right next to me, and I like peeked my head over and I could see her wiping frame. So I was like, at least I got a shot.
Always
but
concerned about the shot. Who cares about my health? I got the
but then I
shot.
but then I go to get up, and when you kind of just know something's wrong, I go to get up and I was like, that's something's not right. And I get on walk. I was like, I don't think I can get up, and they come and get me, and I end up having 2 broken ribs from that fall.
I remember it's actually in my notes. I would look at my notes. I put I Do Anything Broken, question mark, dot dot dot. The other
Yep.
thing that I remember, and you might remember, but you might have been gone at that point
Hmm.
when because we were still shooting. The show must go
Yeah.
on, of course. Those girls ended up having to go to the hospital because they
Yeah.
burned their feet so bad. Now
Oh,
this is
so bad.
Pomona Speedway, the drag strip, in the middle of summer. Probably was like July or something like
It
that.
was nasty hot.
Had to be almost 100 degrees, so you can imagine what it was on the track. All that
Hmm.
asphalt, all of the burned out tire. So it was just basically like this. I
It was
don't
like
know what like
it was
lava, like the literal floor is lava show before it became the
oh
floor is lava. And I remember, I don't even know if I want to say this here, but I'll say it anyway, and people just have to turn down the volume or whatever. But I remember having to shoot one of the women
yep.
when they were taking her off the track, and they're
And her
like, show her
foot.
feet, and I look at her
Oh,
feel, and oh God, I'm not going to go into it. It's pretty gross.
I know
All
exactly
I
what you're
know
talking.
is that if it wasn't a black and white viewfinder, I probably would have thrown up on the spot because it
Yep,
was that fucking
that
disgusting.
was terrible. It was,
That was an
yeah.
insane day. Just for reference, for people who don't know, I Do Anything was this kind of sports wish show where people
Hmm.
would compete to try to win for their person, who wasn't competing, but was like,
Yep.
I'm trying to win a trip to a football game for
Right.
my boyfriend or something like that, or I'm trying, I remember it was like that. I remember the
Yep.
first episode we did was something called basketball. Do you remember that, where they had basketballs velcroed to a bowl, and
Oh yeah.
they and
I
they
can't
had to
believe
get
you
into
still
the
even
ring
get
with the
away with that.
bowl, somehow grab the basketball off of the
Oh,
velcro bowl and make baskets with it. And I remember one guy getting absolutely T-boned by the bowl, and I remember the ambulance having to take him away, and that was kind of the start of the routine. We had a
that
lot
was
of
the start of the downfall. It
ambulances.
was really like the Wild West, man.
It
I can
really
really,
was.
when you think
You know,
back, you're like, how could they get away with that?
that's a Scott Messick question. And I remember at the end of that day in Pomona, and this is where I really gained a lot of respect for Scott Messick, is that, by all means, he should have been like losing his mind. Like, I probably would have walked off and just got in my car and drove away at that point and never came back. But he was calm. He was always calm.
It's
That was
always
the thing
calm.
with
Yep.
Mess. Never raised his voice. Always like, and there's always some crazy shit going on his shows. And he would always just, okay, all right, it's fine. We're going to deal with it. Here's what we're going to
Hmm.
do. Here's our plan. And that was always the thing about Messick, which is
Yep.
you had to love it. But he was kind of his own worst enemy.
He was. He was. Scott.
Oh my God. So yeah, that was no. So that was the kind of thing that I remember. A lot of those shows,
Hmm.
but you felt like it was kind of a badge of honor though when you finished a Mess Media show, because you're going to have to work your ass off, and that the people you worked with were like, you really were going to war. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we eventually, it seemed like we got into some calmer waters, I think, in reality. A
Yeah.
lot of bigger shows um, started to turn union. And one thing that you did for me that I never forgot is you had recommended to me at one point, I can't remember what year it was, but you had said, I think you had joined the union, and you told me that the 600 was trying to swell the ranks of reality
Yep.
shooters. And they said, if you go over there and talk to them, they may waive your feed to join the union.
Hmm.
And I did, and they did, and that's how I got into the union. So
Nice.
that's a thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
I don't know if I ever did thank you, so thank you.
You probably did. I'm sure you did.
Okay. Well, bears mentioning. So now I know that you eventually had transitioned into directing.
Hmm.
Can you take me back kind of to that
Yeah.
point when you started to maybe move into that area?
Yeah. I think it was Bachelor. I was DP in a season. We were in Rome, and I remember after the season was done, I was talking to one of the showrunners, and I told her, I said, if um, this guy Jason Ehrlich, great guy, I said if Jason doesn't come back, because he was kind of producing but also directing all the dates, basically all the field shoots. I said the day that he decides not to come back, I wouldn't mind getting a shot. And it just so happened next season he didn't come back. He went to some other show or something. So that was my like, you know, put me into that spot. And God, that was like 2010, maybe a little before that. Um, and then so I directed on Bachelor and Bachelorette for God, like probably like 10 years, maybe a little less. I can't remember, but I would do the dates, and then whenever Kenny Fuchs couldn't make it, I'd do the rose ceremonies. Um, but then I started getting calls outside of that to direct other shows, and if it was, at the time it was great because I would do batch. I can't remember exactly, but let's say it was Bachelor in the fall, Bachelorette in the spring. So I knew I had those, let's say 5 6 months taken care of, and I just had fill in between. So if the shows fell in between, I'd take them and start directing them, and then It was oh, remember, Lindsay Kugler?
Of course, yeah, I love Lindsay.
Yeah, yeah, I love
Yeah,
Lindsay. She called me up one time to come direct a Gordon Ramsay show, but it happened to be like I would have to. It was during like the almost the end of Bachelor season, so I worked it out between the producers and because she was insistent and she was right, because I needed to start moving out and doing different shows. So I went to I think it was called Hotel Hell.
Hotel Hell. I was gonna say,
Yeah,
yeah.
Hotel Hell. So I went and directed that for her, and then that kind of snowballed into other shows and other shows for Fox, and then yeah, ever since, God. So I guess now I've been directing like over 12 or 13 years, something like that.
Yeah, it seems like, I mean, this is my opinion, probably yours too, is that people who do camera and DP are uniquely skilled, I think, where it
Mhm.
transitions, I think, easily into directing. Can you talk about that at all?
Yeah, it's funny because I know we both know a bunch of other directors. Some come from ADing, some come from camera, some come from directing. I think Rich came straight out of AFI as a director. Um, so for me, yeah, like you're right. Knowing camera and positioning and uh, down to what lenses I'd like to use is was incredibly helpful. What I did realize starting when I started doing it is that you kind of have to let go of a part of it in the sense because you can't be out there like if you were shooting it, what
Yeah.
you do, but you have to learn how to translate that to your operators. Be it to be able to develop that language with them. Um, that was the biggest thing for me to kind of learn and realize. And also, when I was on Bachelor and Bachelorette, I was mostly doing the dates. So when I first started, like one of my first sort of like elimination type shows or big set piece type shows, was definitely a big learning curve. But you get that after you start doing more and more of them, and uh, trusting your people and like you said, I took things from directors that I worked with in the past, like Scott Messick and Rupert. Um, people I really liked working with. Who kind of never knew they lost their cool, but knew what they were doing, had everything. Well, mostly had everything planned out. You always have to be ready for the unknown, um, but you kind of just start learning and building, and you take other people's skills to help you. Like working with an AD, you realize how valuable they are. It's
Very valuable.
good ADs, like you're like, oh my god, I could not do this without him, and good DPs, people better than I was trying to hire people better than myself, especially DP wise, because um, I love that they know more than I do, and I can learn
Hmm.
stuff from them too, whether it be about some new technology or a technique or a different way to shoot things. Um, s- and now I'm going back to kind of what you said. Like all these things make me like miss it so much because I love that's part of it. I love the first day, and I love going to prep, and then I love having the first day of meetings, and how you'll have your whole crew there, and you start talking to them about the show and what you're going to do and what you want to achieve and how this is going to look, and then the first day of shooting when everybody's kind of like that nervous but kind of excited energy. Um, and then you're like, okay, let's roll. Everybody, look in the control room. Everybody ready? We're ready. All right, let's do this. Send the first one or whatever. Let's send the first cast member, and then it goes, and everything starts just kind of going smoothly, and it's just like I get chills even just still thinking about it.
It's amazing. I know it's kind of, I don't know if I want to be so dramatic, but it's a little heartbreaking where we're at because I think in a lot of respects, because when you were talking about that just now, I was getting the same feeling that you were getting. I was
Yeah,
kind of
I was
starting to
getting all
get that
excited. I
feeling.
almost started
I think
crying.
people in production do. They get that feeling, that kind of buzz, that energy inside of them because we're we've been doing it for so long, it becomes a part of you, and then
Hmm.
suddenly you don't get to do that anymore or not as often, and it really is like, I mean, I can tell why people are kind of walking around, theoretically saying, well, now what? Because
Hmm.
you're sort of left without, really, okay, you've taken away what I know, you've taken away a language basically from me,
Yeah.
and now I'm supposed to go just keep moving and learn a new language and go forth into the world, and it's like, it's not easy, man. So
It isn't, man. I was like,
I,
you put it perfectly too, in the sense of like, you know, you know this language, and now you have to learn a new one, and you're ill prepared because you've been in this, say you've been speaking English for me like 25 years, 26 years. Now I have to learn Chinese, and I know about it. I
mhm,
don't know it.
yeah,
So it's tough. And also another thing you said is, I still am like, I don't want to be, but I get like almost like angry, because
yeah,
it's like it was taken from me for whatever reason. Like my wife even asked me, we used to have this conversation. She's like, "What happened? What's happening?" And I used to try to explain it, but I honestly don't know. I don't know. I know it changed after COVID, and I know Mandy had some good answers to enrich too. But if I had to pinpoint anything, I can't. I don't know what happened. It just was there one day and gone the next. It feels like that.
yeah. I had Ronnie Ali on the pod
Oh, I love
recently.
Ronnie.
Just dropped his episode, as it were, and he likened it kind of to the automobile industry when they took that and they started manufacturing in other countries. Like Detroit was the epicenter, and then all of a sudden,
Hmm.
all of the manufacturing went away out of the country. I can't remember exactly what it was that hastened that. It probably was in the 80s with Reagan, I guess. But
Right.
the point is, you had all of these people who had worked all their lives in the industry and the auto industry, and that's what they knew, and it was their pride. I mean, that was the thing. I think, everybody makes a lot of fun of reality. I mean, people don't take
Hmm.
it seriously, but the truth of the matter is that when you consider the obstacles we had to deal with, we made amazing television over the
Hmm.
years. Amazing television. And I mean, stuff that you can be proud of, stuff that you can stand by.
Yeah.
And that's, it's really all of this is about kind of coming to grips with this. So I think it's okay to be sad and it's okay to be angry.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, those are
Yeah.
perfectly human reactions to this. So,
I think I was gonna tell you, it's like just going from that, and like, that it's okay to be angry. And I agree. I don't like the feeling.
yeah,
Um and the other thing which that I find that I don't like either, but it's true, and this I can only speak for myself, is like you were saying when we earlier in this conversation, you were saying there's still some people who are working and everything like that. And um, I consider them like maybe a tier above me, in the sense of who's going to be called first, like Rich.
yeah,
Um, but it used to be like Rich would do his thing and I do my thing. There was enough to go around for everybody. Um, there's obviously not anymore, but I'm I'm like honestly happy for everybody who's working. Like my sister just got back; she was doing below deck, and I'm happy she's working too. But I don't, and this is like, I hope I don't sound like a jerk, but I just don't like hearing about it,
yeah,
because it just makes me not upset at them, but upset that I'm also not working. I hate that feeling, because I don't want to sound like envious or anything like that. It's not that. It's just that I wish I was doing that too. So I'd rather not know about it,
yeah.
and just kind of be ignorance is bliss, than see it and then be upset about it.
You're preaching to the choir, my friend, because I mean, I've always tried to be sensitive about it, especially in the last couple of years. I don't post about work, and that's just a
Me either, not
personal
anymore really,
choice.
unless I have
Um,
to for like a show that they make me do it.
exactly. I mean, because I just feel like there's so many people not working for me to post about, hey, look at me, I'm working. Oh, this is great. Oh, look at my
Right.
friends, we're all working. It's just like there's so many people now who are not working that it just feels like you're just kind of piling on. And I
Right.
mean, and like you said, it's nothing personal. I'm glad they're working. I'm glad people are working, and
Yeah.
the more hopefully people are working, and we'll see if the things that California is trying to do to increase
Mm.
production in the state, maybe that has a positive effect. Maybe there are things that happen in the United States, that
Yeah.
hopefully will change things, but yeah, it's a tough go. So in that
Yeah.
and with that in mind, I have one more unhappy, tough question I have to ask you, unfortunately.
Uh,
Um, when did you sense that maybe things were different, that they were changing? I ask this a lot because I
I
think it's
know.
really an important question. But when for you was it like this feels different than what it was before, when you wouldn't get a call for a couple months, but you kind of knew you were going to get one, and
Hmm.
it somehow is different? How was that for you?
You know, I think it I think it kind of snuck up on me, to be honest. Um, like right after COVID, I think I had gone like I lucked out and like I was doing a show when COVID hit and they sent us all home. But then the end of like in the summer, I got a call to go do a show out of the country, and so I was like, okay, it's kind of just going to be back to normal. Um, but then, so then it sort of was right.
Yeah,
But then I feel like I'm trying to like give it a time or a date, but I feel like between 2022, 2024 ish, it just I think 2022 is when I really started noticing it. Um, and I just, I think I was in disbelief. Like I couldn't, I hadn't gotten a call for anything, and it was just weird. And uh, I mean, if I'm completely honest, I remember I think I broke down one day, even like in front of my wife, because I was just like, all I want to do, I just want to go to work.
yeah,
Um, and I couldn't figure out why I wasn't going to work. Um, and then what was strange though, then 2024, I had a great year. I had two shows, two big shows right back to back. And I was like, okay, everything's back. Well, at least I thought things were starting to start normalizing. And then 2025 comes around and it's crickets until the very end of the year. So I don't even know if I answered your question, but I think if I had to give it a time, around 2022 ish
mhm,
is when it really started hitting me that it's changing, and now I realize that it's kind of feels like a permanent change. I think maybe there'll be a rebound, but slower.
yeah. Um, do you? I mean, this is kind of a loaded question, but do you
Mhm.
have any hope that maybe it will change? I mean, based on
I
what you
mean,
know, what you've heard, people you talk to.
well, I feel like for better or worse, I can't seem to let go of having a little bit of hope. I don't know if it's good or bad. It's just how it is for me. Um, and I think, like I said, I love what I do. I love directing. Everything we talked about earlier, the teamwork, camaraderie, the thrill of nailing the shots, even in long ass days. No, um, but I was emailing my agent um, last week, and this week we're going back and forth, and I was like, hey man, anything? Because early in the year he said, there might be something coming up, and I emailed him this week. He got back to me. He's like, no news. So it's like, and I do to this day, my day consists of, applications for cybersecurity stuff. And then I have a whole list of people who I reach out to in the business, like showrunners, etc., that I'll email or something, or just anything, just try to communicate and see if anything is going
Hmm.
on. And, it hasn't. been anything, and it's weird. I don't know where I was going with that, but I guess I do. Maybe I'm foolish. Still hold up some hope, um, because one show could change my year.
Hmm. Absolutely.
And it's and but here's the other side of it. Let's say I do get a cybersecurity job, which is not easy either. I'm finding out. Uh, so my other part of the day is doing projects that I could put onto my home lab projects that I could put onto my resume for cybersecurity, so that they'll see that I'm not just kind of not doing anything.
Yeah.
But if I do get a call for a cybersecurity job and I get an offer, then it's like, this is a decision I'm making, and I'm going this way now, and I'm saying bye to production. And that might happen, and part of me hopes it does, so that I don't have to deal with this headache of it anymore and the stress of it anymore. And then the other part of me hopes that I get a call today or tomorrow and everything changes and I go back to working.
I think that is the dichotomy, the yin and the yang of it, I guess, basically.
Yeah.
But I mean, in a positive sense, at least you did identify something in your plan B that you wanted to do, that you like to do, that you think that maybe there's, something useful that you can gain from it. And I think that's great. I think that's amazing. So,
Thanks.
and
I
I
hope
don't
so.
want to, we got to get out of the darkness here a little bit. We're going to get into the light a little bit. I want to ask you, you had mentioned that you are starting a podcast. So, because I can let you know there's hardly anybody podcasting anymore. So there's
Yeah, I want to
room
be one
for
of the first in it.
everybody. Everybody should podcast. Tell me about your podcast.
Well, this came up because my wife and we love reading, mostly fiction. But she's incredible. She like can read. I think she read. I can't remember what her record is, but let's say an average of 150 books a year, something like
Wow.
that. Yeah, it's insane.
That's
And she retains
crazy.
it. She retains it so well.
My
It's
God,
crazy.
that is
I'll
amazing.
right.
What?
I'll read like 20 a year.
Yeah, that's still amazing. Come on. I mean, because usually people don't read, I mean, people
Yeah.
don't read
Well,
like they
she
used to. I have a hard time getting
no.
my kids to read. So,
She
yeah.
got me in the habit because we'd go to bed usually and watch some Dateline as we
Hmm.
were falling asleep. And then she's like, "Well, you should start reading more than and watching TV when you go to bed." So we started doing that, and at first I didn't think I was going to like it. Now every night when you go to bed, we for like an hour we'll sit there and read. And I can't remember exactly how we came up with this idea. It might have been hers, but she's like, "We should do a podcast just about our love of books and what books we're reading and everything." And I was like, might not be. Well, why not? Might not be a bad idea.
I think it's
Um,
great.
so yeah, we're gonna start. Well, we started recording it already. The name of the of the podcast is going to be called "His Book, Her Book."
Oh, nice.
Um, I don't know how often we're going to have it. Maybe twice a month or something like that. But yeah, we're just gonna each talk about her. She reads the spectrum, all kinds of books. I pretty much stick to horror, which
Hmm.
has been my love since I was a kid. All things horror. So she'll be talking about hers. I'll be talking about the horror books that I've read or I'm reading. Not necessarily reviewing them, but more just kind of talking about why we love them and what we found in them that we liked and the authors um and then I'll comment a little bit on her book. She'll comment a little bit on mine. Yeah, I think it'll be fun. It'll be a kind of unique perspective. Married couple, both love to read. I like one thing, she likes the other. Yeah, I think it's fun. We started doing it the first day. I'm sure you understood. It was so frustrating figuring out how to record everything.
Oh,
But now
yeah.
we've gotten better. We've gotten better.
I've spent some money. Let me tell you what. I don't think this podcast is ever getting into the black. Let's put it that way. What are you going to do?
But you love it, right? So that's
Well, love. We're at this point in our relationship where we've been dating a while, and me and the podcast, we kind of like each other, but we're not sure what the commitment is or if we have a future. But for now, we're doing great. Yeah.
that's awesome. I'm sure I'm going to be reaching out to you for some information on like
Feel
hosting and all that
free.
stuff.
Listen, I'm so happy that I was able to connect to you. I
Well,
mean,
likewise, man.
I have such fond memories of working with you and being around you. You're such a good person, and
Thanks. Thanks.
I know you're having difficulties. We're all having difficulties. My heart
Yep.
goes out to you, but I know
Mine
that
too,
you
to
will
you.
persevere. I know that about you, and you know.
I have to, right? We have to.
Got to, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and who knows what's going to come around the corner. I've had some podcasts with people who are revisualizing what it means to make content, make shows for
Hmm.
people. The world we live in, podcasts,
Right.
social media, verticals. I mean, stuff that we
Yeah.
would have said, no way, fuck that. But
Yeah.
now it's like, yeah, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Yep.
Well,
100%.
anyway, thank you, German, for taking the time to talk to us. I appreciate your
Thank you.
honesty
I
and your
appreciate it.
forthrightness. And
Thanks,
for
man.
everybody else that's watching, and I hope you are, and I hope there's lots of you, this is B. Smith Second Sticks, and we still are speeding. Thanks again to German Abarca for joining us. If you happen to be listening, thanks so much, and please share the word and hit like and subscribe. B. Smith Second Sticks is produced and edited by Brett Smith. Our music is hit and run by the Sluts with Nuts and is licensed under an Attribution 4.0 international license. See you soon.